it all, so gear up, get ready to plan your day. The ideas are brewing, you're on your way. The fun is waiting outside your door. Good day, Vail. Good day, Vail.
Hi there, and welcome to this episode of Good Day Vail. I am so humbled today to bring to you a featured author, a woman by the name of Heather Hansman, who is the author of Powder Days. She's also a former journalist for Outdoor Magazine and quite a few other magazines as well. And the real fun part is that her inspiration for writing this book called Powder Days actually came from her beginning as a scanner at Beaver Creek. I don't want to get too much into the book, but Heather will be joining us today, and we're going to talk about ski bums, ski towns, and the future of skiing, and quite frankly, how we need to get involved so that we all have a future of skiing, not just tomorrow, but 5, 10, and 100 years from now. So join me today with Heather Hansman on this episode of Good Day Vail.
Good day, Vail. Good day, Vail.
Hi, and welcome back to Good Day Vail. I'm Cece Zach, and I am so humbled today to have our special guest, Heather Hansman from Powder Days, the book. And before we get into the specifics of all these questions I want to ask you about the book, I want our viewers to know a little bit about you. You've spent quite a bit of time in the Vail Valley. What brought you here? What makes you keep coming back to Good Day Vail? Just tell us a little bit about yourself in the Vail Valley.
Sure, thanks for having me. I actually moved to the Vail Valley, to Avon in particular, when I was 21. I was fresh out of college. I had on the East Coast, and I had this idea that I wanted to live in a ski town that was pretty loose and unformed. And a guy that I didn't know that well, that I worked with during the summers, happened to work guest services at Beaver Creek. And so he said he could get me a job. And so two of my best girlfriends from college and I, sight unseen, drove our cars from Massachusetts to Avon and got jobs working at Beaver Creek and lived in the Tarns and kind of started my sort of journey as a real skier and a person in the ski town kind of started here. So it's really fun to be back.
Do you mind if I ask what year that was that you came out here?
2005, 2006.
Okay,
That
so
is me dating myself.
yeah, so it's about half the age of Beaver Creek. So you were right in the midst of when Beaver Creek was really starting to grow. And you say the Tarns too, and I'm sure the Tarns had been around for a few years as part of employee housing. Is that correct?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, it was pretty weathered by that point.
Yeah, pretty weathered. As you and I were talking, you had mentioned that you started as in guest services, and you started as a ticket scanner, but you also wore a yellow coat for a period of time. So tell us a little bit about what that was like on the mountain as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Yellow Jackets get a little bit of flack for their jobs, but it was a really fun job to have because all we had to do was ski. And the year that I was there, they had just started the program, and we had a radar gun that we could play with.
A radar gun?
So
You're kidding me.
And I'm sure it was supposed to be to monitor other people's speeds, but we would just take it out and time each other. So that was a really fun time of my life.
Well, tell us, what did you top out at? You don't feel like you have to.
I don't think I can remember. It wasn't that fast.
Well, as a current ski instructor, I am so grateful to have Yellow Jackets on the mountain, and I'm very happy, actually, that there was a consideration for radar guns. I haven't seen any, don't even know if they have them, but thank you for doing your job back then. But that was clearly the beginning of your thoughts around this fabulous book called Powder Days that you just released last year. Tell us a little bit about what got you inspired to write this.
Yeah. So like I said, I moved here kind of right out of college. I ping-ponged around a couple other ski towns, and then I went to journalism school in Boulder. And when I did that, when I kind of moved down to the city and got a real job, I was really thinking about my friends who are still here and who are still in ski towns and were kind of living the dream, the quote-unquote dream. And I watched them kind of grow up and have kids and kind of establish careers and lives in these towns. And there's something really beautiful about it, but there's also some really, really hard parts to the ski bum dream that I think don't always get talked about, whether that's, economic instability or what's happening with the climate. And so that idea of living the dream and what that dream could be and what made it complicated was just something that I was really fascinated by in my own life. I kind of had this, sliding doors fear that maybe I had missed out on something. And as a journalist, it felt like this really interesting question to dig into. Can you be a ski bum? Could you ever? And where did the idea come from?
And the interesting thing about a ski bum is that not only are they skiing themselves, but they're providing a service for the community, for their own livelihood. So, what are some of the jobs that these ski bums hold or held?
Yeah, I think that a town like Vail, like this valley, like a lot of these Colorado mountain towns are really dependent on the service industry, on the people who work on the mountain, on the people who work in the restaurants and the lodging and the, healthcare services. And I think that when you're somebody who's living in, and I think this was kind of more true 15 years ago before so many people could work remotely, but if you're gonna commit to living in this town, you're really a part of this service economy that makes the towns flow.
And so what were some of the key findings that you had as it relates to individuals trying to make a living here in these services that actually benefit all of the viewers of this show?
Yeah.
What are some of those findings that you had?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. And I guess for a little background, to do the research and the reporting for the show, or for the book rather, I did basically a big road trip, which was really great. I did a big loop around the Western U.S. and popped into all these ski towns to kind of look at what the reality of hardcore skiers looked like.
Would you mind naming a few of those as well?
Sure,
those
yeah.
Areas that you went?
I started in Montana. I went through Big Sky and down into Wyoming to Jackson to Sun Valley. Did a loop through Utah, came through the Vail Valley, Summit County, spent a chunk of time in Aspen. So it was like really a big kind of Western U.S. I spent a little bit of time on the East Coast too. And in those places, every town has its own identity and its own kind of things it's dealing with. But in a lot of those places, housing was really top of the pile, kind of whether local wages could keep up with affordability, and kind of what the sustainability was of the local community. And as skiing gets more expensive, as real estate gets more expensive, we're in a time of inflation right now. So there's a lot of pressures on, the people who, A, love the sport that we all love, and B, are really supporting the towns that we live in.
And it's interesting you using the word sustainability because in the context of what you just said, it was about sustaining the ski bum and those that service the community. But after reading the book, you also found out some other interesting environmental issues as it relates to sustainability as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sustainability as a word applies across the board, I think. And we don't have, even if you take apart the community and the economy and all that, skiing doesn't exist if we don't have snow. So at the most base level, we need to be thinking about protecting the climate. We need to think about carbon reduction if we want skiing as a sport and these places that we live to exist even 10, 15, 20 years in the future. You look at this winter across the country and it's been really variable, California to New England. And I think that's not changing in a positive direction anytime soon.
Well, and I would imagine that some of our viewers don't really know the differences of what we've been seeing with climate, or I should just say the snow in those areas. Could you just tell the viewers, the variability that you've been following in these different areas?
Oh yeah, the Sierras has their biggest snowpack in years, and my parents, for instance, live in New Hampshire, and it's been 50 degrees and raining there. So you get kind of the full spectrum of weather. And climate and weather are not the same thing, but they're very connected.
And which we'll get into shortly, because if we don't have snow, there is no skiing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about the response to the book. What have been the emotions of those readers that you've had a chance to spend time with?
Yeah, it's really, writing a book is so interesting because it happens in your brain and in your computer, and then all of a sudden it's out in the world for people. And for the most part, it's been really positive, and it's been really cool to hear from people who have read it and maybe connected with their personal experience or what they'd wanted to do. There has been some, I think this is kind of like the tricky thing that skiing as a sport is dealing with right now, but there has been some blowback into the fact that I talked about race and identity and economic inequality. And I think that makes some people really uncomfortable, even though that, like who gets to be a skier, who can afford to be a skier, who's welcome in a ski town, I think is some of the most important things that we're thinking about in skiing right now. So I think tensions are high around some of those tricky social issues.
Well, I mean, those social issues are at the forefront of everyone's minds these days, but people are so afraid to talk about them. I enjoy seeing what Eagle County is trying to do in some of those areas. Vail Resorts is always looking for ways to try and tell us about how they're trying to help the community. But one of the things that strikes me is that there's the minorities are really growing as a huge part of the population here. And what I see from your book, and if we look at the ski bum as being the person that's servicing us, and they could be minorities in some instances, we've really got to spend time helping them figure out how to live life here with all of us and feeling comfortable about it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If skiing doesn't reflect what our community actually looks like and what the country actually looks like, then the sport is going to die. I think making it open and inclusive and welcoming and accessible is one of the most, if we want, skiing as a sport and as an economy and the archetype of the ski bum to live on, we really need to open the doors and make sure that it's something that's accessible to not just the kind of easy traditional image of the ski bum, which is a, privileged white man.
Yeah.
So I think that we really have to work on opening the doors.
So hold that thought, the privileged white man and the future of skiing. So this is Cece Zach with Good Day Vail with Heather Hansman. We'll be right back. We're going to take a station break. This is the Powder Days episode.
Good Day Vail. Good Day Vail.
Welcome back to Good Day Vail, and this is the Powder Days episode. I'm thrilled to have Heather Hansman here, the author of the book Powder Days. And when we left our last segment, we were talking about some of her findings as it relates to the emotions that her readers have provoked. And we talked about some of the negative emotions, which we'll get to in a second, but let's talk about some of those positive emotions that readers came to you and say, my God, this is such a great thing. I've learned so much from you. What are some of those things?
Yeah, I think part of what I've heard is that there hadn't necessarily been a book like this before that kind of encompassed what it meant to be a skier, that wasn't just a profile of Warren Miller or Lindsey Vonn or somebody who was like a, celebrity. And it's just kind of like a normal person story. And I think that...
And I have to say, and thank you for bringing that up, because it really is a normal person story, and I could relate to it so much, and I learned so much. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but it is a normal person story, so thank you for saying that.
And I think that, for me, I thought, I spent 4 years thinking about this book, and one of the things I've thought about a lot is why skiing is important, and if it is important, in the grand scheme of things. And I think, what I settled on for me, and what I think that has come up for a lot of people, is that, skiing is something that I do just for joy, just for fun. There's no social pressure. There's no, if I go to ride my bike, sometimes it's for exercise, but skiing is just for joy. And I think that's a really important thing that we maybe don't get in a lot of places. And so I think that's kind of resonated for some people too, that we need to prioritize being outside and being in community.
And I'm happy that you're saying being outside too, because there's probably a lot of viewers that don't necessarily ski anymore, or at least downhill ski. And that's what the book resonated for me. It's not just about skiing, but it's how you can apply it to the mountains and what that brings to us here living in the valley. I mean, we are looking for that joy.
Yeah, and there's some really interesting, one of the things that, a book can kind of become a wormhole, it goes all these different ways, but one of the things that I ended up being a bigger piece of the book than I thought was sort of the mental health aspects of skiing and of recreating, and why that feels important to people, and why certain people are maybe more drawn to, move to Vail or push their bodies. But I think it's really important for our physical and mental health to be outside and be active and be in the environment. So I think there are, sometimes it can feel like I know for me when I was younger, being a ski bum felt a little bit self-indulgent, but there are some real, physical, biological reasons why it's important for us to do this.
Yeah, and you mentioned in the book that sometimes when people do move to the mountains, it's to escape maybe a previous life or previous challenges that they have. And I bring that up because I am very proud of what I'm seeing here in the Valley with Eagle Valley Behavioral Health and others really tackling mental health head on because of some of the devastating things that we've seen here. And you mentioned a few of those in the book. So I'm really happy that you brought that up because our viewers need to recognize that this is something that we do need to talk about, we do need to embrace. And matter of fact, I think when we were preparing, I mentioned to you, I was at a restaurant in Avon the other day that they even have a mental health tax in your chit at restaurants now, where we can provide an extra tip, so to speak, or a tax that can be donated towards mental health issues here in the Valley. So thank you for bringing it to the forefront, and thank you for making it a topic that we can talk about.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important to talk about. Across the Mountain West, a lot of ski towns have incredibly high, disproportionately high suicide rates. Yep. There's a lot of people who are struggling. And I think sometimes the culture around skiing and outdoor sports is that, everything is awesome. You're having the best day ever. And when that's not true, I think it can be really hard. So I think it's really crucial to be talking about this stuff and kind of opening doors.
And you bring up culture. So, and you speak a lot about culture in the book. And all of those resort towns that you had mentioned, a lot of them have a lot of consolidation going on, which really reshapes the future culture. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts about the shifts you're seeing in ski resort town cultures.
Sure. Yeah, I think, one of the questions and one of the hard parts at the heart of this book is that I think it is becoming harder to make a living as a worker in a ski town. Things are getting more expensive. We have more short-term rentals and second homes. We have people moving in from outside. And I think that if we want these towns to retain their culture and to have a sense of community and a sense of liveliness and also just, people working and thriving in these places, we really need to think about from a community standpoint, from a government standpoint, what it means to kind of hold on to that culture and how do we support, whether it's housing, whether it's transportation, whether it's education, how do we support the people who are in these towns who make the towns work? Because otherwise they kind of become empty shells.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for bringing up government because one of the things that I've been following is that the town of Vail has a new strategic plan where I believe it's called the Vail Steward Plan, and they have these 5 pillars to not just evaluate, but to be able to make sure they do enough research in certain aspects of the town in order to protect the culture, in order to create the best world-class experience. I can't remember all of them, but it is called the Vail Steward Plan. As a matter of fact, I think it's being reviewed at the end of this month, and whereby they'll put resources again. My point being is that there is a part about the culture, and I see it shifting just in the few years I've been here. And my fear is that the more consolidation that happens, more big enterprise comes in, that the shifting culture is not necessarily a good thing for these resorts. So I wanted to highlight that as a piece to our viewers and to yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a really real fear, and it's not coming from nowhere. And I think that point about know what's going on in your local government. One of the things that that's really stuck with me in the book research and thinking about it. Auden Chandler, who's the head of sustainability at Aspen, and I apologize for talking about Aspen.
Oh, that's okay. We all learn from each other.
He's somebody who thinks a lot about community development and sustainability and whatever capacity that might be. And he said something to me where he's like, the problem with the idea of the ski bum and historically is that it's anti-citizenship. And you have this idea that like you're sneaking by under the radar and you don't have to pay for things and like you're kind of sticking it to the man. But if you think like that and act like that, then the world will change around you and maybe not for the way that you want it. So I think that idea of like being an engaged citizen in the community that you live in is crucial right now, especially as we see kind of big forces changing the towns that we live in.
Yeah, I mean, what you're telling me is that it's not just the ski bum that the government official was referring to. It really is around the community. And if we're going to live here And I know just from my own experiences that the demographics here are shifting, and there's more people spending a lot more time here. We need to be a citizen, and we need to, forget what we know from where else we may have come from, forget those beliefs, and really jump in and be a part of the community. So, wow, it's an interesting thought. Let me touch upon one more topic that I know is very near and dear to your heart. And that's around the climate action and the various things that you see or you think we should be doing more of in these mountain towns.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I think like we were just talking about with weather, like this is the most base issue for the future of skiing. I think, are we going to have winter? And I think there's so many levers that we can push on. I mean, that local government and industry in where we live is a huge one. The outdoor industry is a huge economic developer. We have this huge, incredible amount of power that we could leverage in the government that I think isn't being done as much. So I think pushing big businesses to move away from carbon, looking at our elected officials and passing policy to move away from fossil fuels. I think that we have these kind of levers that we can push in towns like Vail that are really important.
Well, and I know Vail Resorts has their net zero program, and their deadlines are 2030, and it'll be interesting this year. I'm going to do some research on this to see how they're faring against that, especially since COVID. But I think it's really important that we all understand what government's trying to do, nonprofits are trying to do, what the big businesses are trying to do, and fall in line with our own daily behaviors.
Yeah, and as a citizen,
happen.
you get to put pressure on
That's right.
the businesses that you use and your local government. Yeah. So I think it can be easy to feel overwhelmed and disempowered by climate change because it's so humongous. But like we have levers that we can push.
One baby step at a time.
Sure.
So with that, if you had any thoughts you wanted to leave our viewers, if there was one or two things or a behavior change, what is it that you'd like our viewers to take away from this episode?
I mean, I think that idea about finding joy and fun is really important. And I think also that being an engaged citizen in the place that you live. And, if you want a town like Vail or like Avon or Edwards to, continue to be interesting and thriving and full of community, like that's on you.
Well, I love that because my favorite quote in the world is by Gandhi, be the change that you want to see in this world. And so I ask all of you to run to the Bookworm and buy Powder Days. I know it's there on the shelves. That's where I got mine, my signed autographed copy when Heather was in last year for book signing. So thank you all for joining us. Good Day Vail. Be a part of the change that the Vail Valley needs, and let's do our part to be in the community. Heather, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
On your way, the fun is waiting outside your door. Good day.